All right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the beautiful Alpine Ski Club. Thank you very much, Jason Batting and Alain and everyone who's allowed us to use this beautiful facility today. My name's Fred Patton. I am the owner of the Phoenix Group of timing companies, which we are in the unique position in the world of being the only simultaneous distributors of algae, Hoyer, and microgate products, along with brands such as Finish Links and Race Result and all sorts of other stuff, because we do this year-round. I mean, we don't sell banners and flags and poles and tower pads. All we do is sports timing, and we focus on it because there's only one thing that's truly important in my life as a facilitator, but also as a parent of an athlete. The only thing that really matters is the kid or the participant out on the hill. I mean, everything else, scoreboards, videos, live streaming, it's all irrelevant if we lose track of the concept of fairness. It's kind of like the Star Trek Prime Directive, right? Do no harm or whatever. Well, our job, cut and dried, is fairness and accountability. And if you can get through whatever you're doing and you feel comfortable at the end of the day that you've done your very best, that's all we can ask from anyone, all right? Because we are, in fact, just humans. So our collective responsibility is fairness. And we have lots of different tools, but tools alone are not the entire package. Procedures, protocols, and of course accountability, which is, we're very blessed, particularly in alpine skiing nowadays, that we have this whole roadmap, right? We have the TTDR concept, this pre-flight checklist. We have the way of forensically determining a winner or a placing of a race, even though everything went bad, right? We still have the tapes. We still have the hand times. We still have layers of accountability. And, as a parent now of a U14 kid who goes out there and skis his heart out and competes all over. He hasn't had a chance to be up here yet, but the cool thing that he's discovering is that it doesn't matter whether he's at Killington or in North Carolina or out in California or up here, the rules are fundamental. You've got specifications, you've got sets, you've got this, you've got that. So that's really kind of neat, so that you can see graduated progress as you progress as an athlete. What we're trying to do as facilitators in timing and scoring and so forth is to make as much information possible and in open and transparent form. This whole concept of timingguys.com, the forums. Now there's Facebook pages which have a lot of great information too. Within reason, there is no reason to hold anything back. As I like to say, there are no stupid questions unless the one's asked 5 minutes before the first forerunner. Right? So with all the communications tools we have, we have, in our pocket a device more powerful than the space shuttle, right? So communication is free. Use it, right? Don't hold back and go, because we all do things, and there are amazingly great resources. Quite honestly, I picked up this live streaming on YouTube Live right now. My limit of technology is, 60%, right? So he goes and puts this program called TeamViewer on this computer. So he's been remotely, hi Sylvan, thank you. He's remotely monitoring, and got this thing all up and running in 2 seconds. these concepts exist, and TeamViewer in particular is an amazing tool because literally anywhere from anywhere in the world can log on to your computer and look at what you've done and go, oh, well, of course it's not working because you put it in that folder instead of that one, right? And then they can do stuff. So great resources exist. Never be afraid, to. And, I think the most poignant illustration of people existing in their own bubble and not joining the world of timing and scoring for. I don't know. We all, I think, various stories of what happened at the final downhill race. Right? An extraordinarily embarrassing situation for the team of professionals, highly paid professionals that were there, right? Basic bottom line is these guys were less prepared for circumstances that occurred than any of you guys here in the room. Could not accurately produce an EET, or once they attempted to produce it, implement it. And this is one of the most basic things that we, because we're all dealing with a live sport. Things are going to happen, right? Kids are good. It's never the kid who hits the post and takes out the. It's a problem, right? It's the kid right behind him, 20 seconds, right? And hand timing and all the other layers of things that people go, we don't want to do that. It's just those checks and balances, right? Because we have no other way of determining how the kids do, right? It's not like, oh, you got a beautiful extra point. It's without the timing. We have gate judging, of course, but without that, we have no way of differentiating, right? So the worst possible scenario is, to say, oh, you don't go take it, would you? Because, the kids never do. That's like the absolute is to have send somebody back up because the 3 layers of things that we're working on, all 3 failed, right? So in the case of this incident, and again, there's different interpretations, and I will defer to my colleague, Matt Howard, who actually has worked with people recently and so forth. Concepts, all right, a little bit, but the concept of equivalent electronic time is something that we hammer into everyone over and over and over again. Cornerstones, along with the penalty of what we're doing to make ski racing, actually work. So, what ended up happening there was he did it after, as I understand it, from my people, and downloading the instructions on how to do it. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine being at a World Cup and actually not having the facility to do an EET and having to download the instructions and then sit there and go, seated, but they add tracking, or was it the other way around? Whatever, the wrong thing to do. So then the other coaches are like, they had to send all that data to people in the FIS timing working group, who then that night redid everything and then presented it, the next day. So compounding the initial lack of preparation and so forth was the fact that these other people had to overrule the people on site. Now, again, I'm not sure who the chief of timing and calculations was at that event, but most circumstances I remember in the past was that these people get pretty well intimidated, when these, traveling professionals are there. Again, everyone's human. We can all do things. And apparently the group that was in Switzerland was not quite as swift as the group that worked with Matt, who lifelined you from Korea, I think. Yeah. So again, it is what it is, right? So there is several different layers, several different things. There is, again, at that level, at the World Cup level, I think everybody does agree, at the Olympic level, it's a TV show, right? And the people who are performing, whether they're the athletes or the coaches or whomever, are essentially actors, and doing their athletics and so forth. However, it has always struck me as interesting that when you're at that level, it's actually much, much simpler, okay, as a mechanical thing, right? Because you're dealing with, first of all, you're dealing with athlete differentiation that's very, very narrow, right? From the first to the last seed in the Olympic Games, we're looking at, seconds, right? Now, what's the most difficult event, in a ski race at a time, right? It's a U8 race or so forth, where the kids are just doing what they perceive to be, their job. How many kids do you see just straight line it, right? They're like, oh, I'll do these few gates and then, and kids who are shedding equipment and redoing things and hopping back in and hiking and doing all sorts of stuff, right? It's, it is what it is. And it is extraordinarily difficult to try to keep track of that situation if you have all these various layers of procedures and so forth. So you have to use common sense, right? Because the disparity of ability is so great in some of these earlier categories, use tools like hand timing is great, right? You're asking somebody with a watch to do a specific recording task every minute, right? Every 45 seconds or so, as opposed to having to juggle or keep track mentally of all of this flow going on. You've got a clipboard and you got a stopwatch, right? So hand timing is a really, really excellent way of determining reasonableness. And then from a reasonableness standpoint, if necessary, you can bracket that down, right? And you can say, oh, okay, every kid on this course was doing 45 to 45:10. So I know that if the hand time came in at 45:12, that's kind of what I'm looking close to that when I'm doing my calculation, to try to ascertain what's going on. The other thing is that everybody who's involved in a team deserves to be part of a team. I mean, I know that it's very, very difficult to recruit people as volunteers and so forth to come out and do gate judging or slipping or hand timing and so forth. But particularly for the people who are working in kind of our aspect of what's going on, everything that you can do to involve those people is in part of the production. And a lot of times it's really simple. It's put a headset on, and you've got a push to talk switch, or you have some other kind of thing so that you don't necessarily have to, they don't feel compelled to talk to you, but they can listen on. They can hear what's going on. Because again, a well-run ski race is kind of like running a little orchestra, right? There's a rhythm to what we're doing. There's a musical flow to the racing. And if everybody is along on the same piece of music, it's really quite pleasant to go and do this. It only becomes challenging and difficult if somebody pushes the thing to the side, right? And when things become discordant, then so in a lot of circumstances, again, look at what you are. If you're not live on TV, if you're not doing something, if it's not freezing cold, if it's not some extenuating circumstance that's going to preclude you from taking a breather, in general, common sense says if things are going in the toilet, stop, start, and collect it. Go outside or do something. Come back in. Grab a Coke or something. But do something that pushes the reset button, because in my experience, and again, I've only done what I've done, but any kind of timing and scoring pause, all right, because we don't necessarily want to go timing hold. We want to take a breather, let that flush out, let the circumstance that occurred get rectified. And a lot of times that's like, take the data and try to hand it to somebody else and say, can you please work on this? And then, restart the race. But try to get back in that rhythm, try to get back in happy place. And then everything goes much, much better on, because as you all well know, particularly in younger races, right, parents can smell blood, right? They're like, and they're all like, I drove 6 hours to get little Johnny to come to this race, and they're going to go, but on the scribble board it said this and that, it's like the concept of unofficial results doesn't always resonate, it's like, I got a picture, of the result board, and now my kid's in 39th place and he was in 37th, Try not to give people an opportunity, to come out and, legitimate questions are completely legitimate, obviously, but, don't, because once you pull that plug out of the dike, once one parent does it, they're all going to do it, right? So don't give them the opportunity to. So if you have to stop the race, think to yourself, hey, if they have to call patrol, if they've got a kid who's hurt on the hill, that's going to take way more time than my time. It does, it's like, can you, in one of your committees at some point, Matt, can you use a different word except for timing hold? You know what happens. You hear that, and all of a sudden you go, But, a lot of times, and no disrespect to things, a lot of it is very avoidable because it comes back to communication, right? There was a DNF on course, and the jury or communication didn't call it. And kid comes through, and most of us don't have the luxury of having these beautiful timing buildings with beautiful views and all this stuff. We're basically timing in a trailer, right? Peering out of some window. And you don't know, or the finish is so quick, you can't a bib number or something. And it's like, who was that? And it was, in fact, the next kid. Well, work, right? Then you need some time to do it. And the further you go into it, the accelerate. If you have this, it's probably going to happen again. So whatever you can do to kind of assume that something's going to get that information, or you can get it via a jury radio, or you're going to get it via your own headset loop, are you going to have, whatever technique or technology, and then what's going to happen if that fails? Because again, we're in an outdoor sport. I mean, fundamentally, ski racing, at least, alpine is real simple, right? It's gravity. You could put numbers on basketballs and let them fall down the hill, and fundamentally do the same thing as with athletes, right? It's a vertical time trial without any other interference. It's first in, first out. So you take that and then you add environmental challenges, you add communications challenges, and you add athlete and experience challenges, and you get U8 racing, right? So. But sometimes circumstances, are unavoidable, and the next step in this whole thing is don't be a Richard Nixon, right? The perceived issue is always better than the cover-up. All right, we all have our pride, we all have our skills, we all have people in our peer group that we need to answer to. But I've always found it's better to just suck it up and admit, yeah, you're right. I screwed up. Okay? Only do it once, because you have to approach every day as a learning experience, right? Every day we are blessed to be above ground, so to speak. We should be learning something, right? Because the human mind has an amazing capacity for that. I mean, it's something that we're all very fortunate to be able to do that. And again, it's kind of like, how does a child learn languages so rapidly? A child learns languages rapidly because placed in the proper environment, the child is listening, communicating as best they can, being corrected, and repeating it until they bracket it down to. And this is what education, people say, oh, I got to send my kid to college and whatever to do all this stuff. Well, the idea of learning and education and so forth is as much to know where to go and look for the information, right? How to critically process it, how to deal with the information that you have and make it relevant for you, right? And then how to retransmit that information back to other people in a format that they can understand, right? So it's something that, again, open and free communication is, I think, absolutely vital, and also, environmental, exposure. All right, you go and see how other people do stuff in other countries. The world is now tiny, right? You can go anywhere on this planet in 36 hours. Maybe not. I don't know how long it takes to park at Pearson, but you can get down there, you can get on a plane, and you can go as far as you can go, which I think from here is probably Invercargill, New Zealand, in 36 hours. Right? So given the opportunity to go and learn and travel and so forth, you can pick up, interesting, things. I mean, I think, I've been very, very fortunate that you guys, have, continuously invited myself, and Matt to come up here. It's quite refreshing to get a different viewpoint on how sports, because Canadians in general tend to follow European patterns. We're still fighting the revolution in a way. It's like, we don't want to follow the FIS rules. We want to invent something different, just to invent something different. And it's so annoying because you're constantly going, well, why aren't we doing it this way? Oh, no. We're going to, invent something different just to be different. It's like, the metric system, right, is one of the most logical measurement systems in the world, right? Every vehicle that's made in America, every washing machine, if there are any, if there's any product that's made in America nowadays, it's all metric fasteners, right? I grew up working on bicycles, and everything was metric, and that's how I learned. But to see people stubbornly holding on to these, archaic vestiges and not being open. I don't care if you want to, remember and use old systems, but, you've got to at least recognize that other people have good ideas and that common sense says to adopt a system that works. This must be tremendously frustrating to you, Gilles, to see how, people, just look at things and there is, of course, no bad, there's always two ways of doing it, multiple ways. And when we're learning things initially, we tend to learn what the person taught us. Okay, I'll give you a perfect. The other day, I don't know his name. I apologize. The fellow Kevin Dashensky or something similar to that from BC. What is his real name? Davinsky. Sorry. Well, Kevin emails and he goes back and forth, and we were involved in something the other day with a Tag Heuer CP5 545. And he's like, I can't get it. I can print the memory from an Alki Timey, but I can't print it from a 545. Well, that's completely illogical. And we went back and forth for a couple emails, and I said, well, what run did you choose to print? And he goes, run? And I'm like, yeah, when you start the timer, you do this, and it says open run, and we never do that. And I'm like, okay, why, how do you expect the timer to remember something if you didn't give it a pathway? You didn't give it a folder. Stuff in. He goes, yeah, well, the guy who taught me how to use these, we never did that. So all they would do is they would turn the timer and just let it spew tape all day long, and use it as a stupid time base, like an old live type of thing. But the camera open to run, he could never print the memory. So when I guess some printer jams or something, and they went to follow what was on the cheat sheet, and of course there was no run to print. So then you could hear this big light in the, coming from BC, like, he goes, and then he goes, oh, great to know, I'll spread the word, which there's other people out there, same thing, because somebody in the beginning, right, okay, so, but again, that's kind of what we're here, because I've made every mistake in the book several times. Gilles, being a professional contractor, Matt being a professional contractor, out there, and your livelihood depends on not, screwing up. The reason you're there is because like people at the local club goes, oh yeah, well we'll do the Nancy Green races, we'll do the the development races, but when we've got a championship or something, we want, which is completely logical, because when you're having a championship or something like that, so it's your club, you've got people coming, you want to enjoy yourself, so why not have a professional person come in who at least, if there's a situation, right, you can go right over there, there's your man. See that big antenna? He's the lightning rod, We didn't do it. We hired him. And then it's incumbent upon the professional to do the things that are necessary, which, backup equipment, of course, important. Getting there on time. I try to make, my claim to fame is being the first person at the venue. I was out in California last week, and everybody else showed up at 6:45. I was there at 6 every morning because I'm in California, right? It shouldn't be too hard for me to wake up in the morning. But it also sends a good signal. It says, I'm here, I'm ready, I'm on top of it. And one morning I came out, and we were going to do a slalom on this one hill, and it hadn't been. Believe me, right? Because we're dealing with, if he used a lot of salt. We didn't use urea. We used salt. I was surprised. But knowing that, giving that extra hour of a window of calling somebody and said, hey, you know that your guys never groomed this trail. How are we going to set on this? Caused a bit of flutter, but it was worthwhile giving these guys 45 minutes extra warning, because, we're somewhat captive of our environment, right? You can't set a course. The lift is, all these other extenuating circumstances, and this is a lot of what we're talking about too, with timing and scoring, right? Whether it's Cam or Matt or the guys in Vola or Jeff Elder, everything is layered, right? And for the foreseeable future, our layer is Windows, right? So if Windows isn't working or whatever, then we can't layer software on top of it. We can't layer a timer on top of software, and we can't do the the bride and groom on top of the cake. So, it's like people try to understand this concept, but you get pushback. It's like, reboot the computer. Favorite answer? I don't have time to reboot the computer. Excuse me, you have no choice, because you're asking this computer to take this USB or serial input and send this out and do this, and unless you have the basic foundation stable. Amazing number of people halfway through the race, it's like, computer's going to die. It's like, do you have the power supply for that? Type of thing, right? There's a certain amount of basic infrastructure things that you have to pay attention to. Now, a guy who's a professional has to deal with that stuff a lot more readily, So, following, and this is one thing we're going to go. I mean, it's like, what kind of tricks and so forth do you have that make your life, I have to say easy, because we're not doing this because it's easy, right? If it was, we could be playing scratch-off games, and we're out here supporting a very active winter sports environment. And we're doing it in a very compressed time frame, too. This is kind of why I'm so glad guys came and so are. This is why we're doing it this weekend and not, in May, because, very soon we're all going to go flipping into summer mode, right? And in the winter, we're dealing with a very, it's been described as a 3-month sprint, right? And it's go, go, go. We got to do here. We got to go there. We got to run. We got to do this. Well, part of the off season for a lot of these things is trying to make sure that basic infrastructure things are taken care of, like the worst possible situation for battery-powered timing equipment, alkaline battery-powered stuff, is leave the batteries in things and leave your S4 timer sweltering on a countertop, and you'd be amazed at the number of skiers that I hike up to, and I know the timing buildings are. I do it for fun. I hike up there and I look in the window, and I see all the timing equipment just beautifully laid out on a countertop, just baking in the sun, right? All still connected to the mountain wiring, right? One lightning strike, and there's serious damage to all that stuff, right? And where did the average person find out about it? After American Thanksgiving, right, or early December. And what's the first thing you do? You open a bag and you go, ooh, an entire mouse family, living in your start bag, right? And you got mouse piss all over your start gate. Your head is set. You're like, common sense, is such that take things. Don't be afraid of opening something and seeing if you not familiar with it, all right? Again, communicate, all right? Because battery leakage, even the best batteries. I used to love Duracell. I would use nothing else, but even Duracells now become subjected under heat. If you leave them in your freezer, they're fine. But you take a S4 timer, most common thing, right? C-cell batteries, 6 of them in there, baking in a black case, you're going to get a leak, and it's not good. Also, like your battery-powered wireless, like your Racetime 2. Okay, that type of batteries, and even the more sophisticated lithium-ion ones that are in our phones, charge, discharge, right? You don't take your car and you leave it at the airport for a year, right? And then come back and jump in it and roar out on the interstate, it's probably not going to start. You got to use, so if we're depending on power, if we're depending on, again, that's part of that kind of bottom of the cake scenario. When in doubt, put fresh batteries in, right? It's cheap, you know. And don't, you know, if you're going to use batteries in a way that you're trying to stretch their life out, at least get a digital multimeter that'll tell you precisely the voltage in it. Don't rely on one of those, you know, little Canadian Tire quick checker things, right? You know, use a real multimeter that'll tell you that it's got 1.35 volts in it, you know, which anything under 1.45 you really shouldn't use, because again, you remember, outdoor environment, any battery that indoors is 1.45, the minute you take it out, it's minus 15, you just kicked away 25% of your battery. And if you're using wireless and things like that, you've just shortened your effective service hours. So timers that have embedded batteries in them and so forth, take the stuff out in July. You know, pick a day, Bastille Day. You know, take it out, lay it all out. You don't have to set it and run it and run things, but just take it out and turn it on and let it go for the day. Drain the batteries down a little bit, and then charge the thing back up again. When you go in November to use it again, so other things, you know, related to that are my favorite, which is the start bag, you know, the backpack. The backpack that's got half-eaten apple, sandwich that nobody liked, the soda that's still in there, the start gates, and the headset, and the amp, and the wire. It all came down wet because it's spring. Probably has urea salt on it too. And where does it go most of the time? If you're hang on a peg. Most of the time it's on the floor, right? You've got over $2,000 worth of stuff in a bag molding on the summertime. So even if it's not your job, you know, it's the starter or whatever. You know, we always like to say, whoever's driving the car gets to pick the music. Normally let somebody who's in the back seat, you know, go and fiddle with the radio. You know, the driver pretty much picks, right? The bus, if you're running that timing system or that, you're overall really responsible, you know. Even if you've got some, you know, I never go to the start. Joey always does it. Ultimately, that critical part of what's affecting you, you've got to maintain some control. And it can be direct. Like how many times do you go and inspect your own starts? Every once in a while. How many times do you inspect your own starts? Right. Okay. Exactly. So, right. All right. I mean, I have to say that when I was doing stuff, exactly the same thing. I always had kind of a rule, which was the put off rule. You know, came down every night, and everybody had to take everything out, whether it's photocell cases or whatever, and lay it out on a table and wipe it off. Suspect thing, you had to, you know, be able to look at your batteries and all that kind of stuff. They're not going to blame in the back seat for the car wreck. It's the driver's responsibility, right? So, what I would like to say is that I've been very, very fortunate along the years to be able to participate in sports as a kid, and then in sports business and so forth. I can't do what I do effectively without feedback from you guys. And like I said at the very beginning, I'm in a very unique position where I have 3 companies, different brands, and the great thing is that we're not juggling this. You know, we're really not doing that. We've got 3 parts of our warehouse. We've got 3 websites. We've got 3 lines of identification. What we're doing, though, is providing a buffer. Unlike Europe, where if you with something, you can hop in your car and you can drive 5 hours over to the Tag Heuer factory, right? And you can say, you know, I got a problem, right? Not quite so convenient for those of us in North America do that. So over the years, I've developed this kind of concept where it is my primary responsibility to protect you guys and your investments, right? Because we're talking about substantial amount of money for effectively a 3-month sprint, right? We're not, you know, we love for people to go, hey, I want to time a mountain bike race. I want to do some dry land training. You know, I want to have a thing. I want to loan or help the running race club do, you know, a 5K in August. Perfect. Equipment is made to use. It's not made to sit there. So if you can find other things, particularly if you can find fundraising opportunities to get money back, by all means do it, right? And you never know. You may find somebody, well, what do you guys do in that, you know, ski club? Because there's a lot of people. I mean, there are people doing running races and swimming meets and cycling. You know, right now down in Milton, there's the Junior National Cycling Championships going on at that beautiful velodrome down there. And you know what they're doing? Fundamentally exactly the same thing we're doing, except they're all indoors. You know, they've got very little environmental issues. But all sports, right, have 3 essential phases. There's a registration phase, otherwise known as the root of all evil. The competitive phase, which is you're either scoring people, timing people, or a combination of both. And then there's the results and dissemination phase. It's only the middle part that's differentiated by rules or customs. So there's a lot of people out there who have a lot of really, really good ideas about some of the aspects that everybody's dealing with. And I think everybody who does this kind of thing does it because they truly enjoy the atmosphere. I mean, I'm speaking for a lot of people I know. You get involved in these things either because your kids are involved in it or you were involved in it or whatever, and it grows, and you have this whole fraternity, this whole community of people, and you know, it is neat. I mean, I you know, just amazes me all the interesting things that I see that people are doing, and you know, each one of them has found their way to similar results by different pathways. And, you know, whether it's, hey, you know, have you tried this little Intel, computer thing? It's really cool. It does all this kind of stuff. Oh yeah, I tried that for this. Or have you tried this modem, type of thing, or this USB? Oh, this USB adapter is really hot, type of thing. The information that I'm hoping to gather from you guys will help me communicate it this summer when I go and sit down with these manufacturers and say some things, because everything's, evolutionary, right? And we are facing the end of a lot of formally established concepts behind particularly hardware, right? We all know that software is continuously evolutionary, and because there is always that idea. What if just could do this? I've been, people I do it sometimes. I wake up in the middle of the night and go, why can't this do this? It seems so simple to me. And then the programmer goes, well, when the idea is great, but in order to do that, I have to, go back here and build this to this to this to this to this to this to allow at this juncture that option. And quite correctly, these guys come back and they go, how many people really want this? Is this something that could be universally used, or is this something that you want? And if it's something you want, quite honestly, these guys have a complete right to go, that's $5,000. You really want it? It's $5,000. Because everything you do in a software program down here may inadvertently deal with something, and the amount of testing required to follow that is, there's only one thing worse in the software business than testing, and it's documentation, right? And we all get where we're going a lot by documentation, but most of the time, just like, I'm free to it, I call people on the phone, it's like, I'm stumped, get me out of this hole. So the manufacturers, years ago, a lot of these things was like little workshops, right? Just because it's Europe, right? Evolution over the watch business. The old-time watch business was farmers in the wintertime hold barns laboriously making individual components of watches with little files, little saws and little files. Then in the springtime, they'd all go to La Chaux-de-Fonds with their pieces and a watch, right? Well, those days are long gone, obviously, right? Well, the early days of sports timing production, Algae, for example, Mr. Algae, and there in fact was a Gunter Algae, right? This fellow's family was primarily involved in the manufacture of equipment to support the embroidery business, right? And remember, the earliest computers and all this sort of thing were punch card or tape systems for patterns, in England and what making fabric. This whole idea of a binary system of a punch in a tape, right? Well, the embroidery system that these guys were working on went from tapes, and little feelers reading the thing, to more and more sophisticated thing, relays and this and that, and then eventually into electronics. Well, the Gunter Algae, he was kind of iconoclastic. He was into radios, right? So after World War II, he got into radios and stereos and all these kinds of things. Well, apparently what happened, the legend is that people from Switzerland would come over to his radio workshop in Austria with their, miscellaneous piece of Swiss, Omega or Longines timing gear, right? This guy was inquisitive, and he'd start taking the stuff apart, right? And he'd look and he'd see how these things were built. And he understood, he was self-taught, but he understood how various types of circuits and, integrated circuits and gate arrays and logic circuits, worked. Well, he came out with the S1 timer, right? Which was this little timer box that did the same thing as a stopwatch, except it had an input and output. Right? One thing led to another. Little by little by little, gained some traction. And then they made a partnership with the Austrian government of kind of an educational grant system, economic grant system, and created more and more sophisticated hardware. But this was all right. Literally, the early days, soldering circuit boards and so forth, just like, famed HP or, Apple Garage or whatever. That's quaint. Modern day world, you cannot anymore, right? So let's that every manufacturer of manufacturing to outsource board production and other critical parts, right? So if you look at a piece of timing hardware nowadays, right, you've got a case, right, which is either machined or stamped or molded, and you've got circuit boards and other components. But just like Ford does build cars in the traditional, right? They've got components coming here, windshields coming from these guys, engines from here. They got an assembly line and they're assembling it. Well, everybody's doing it. So what's happening is that they cannot add resources to doing what he did. So the first repair, right? Assemble a nice big box of that we couldn't fix our things. We used to be able to replace components, right? We could go on and desolder a component off a circuit board, component on, and get it running again. Can't do that anymore because even with the finest type soldering iron, even with kind of like soldering iron, minuscule the amount of heat necessary to try to deal with a component on a modern circuit board, the circuit board. So the only rational thing to do is take it out and pitch it and put a new one in. It's just a regrettable part of the way the manufacturer manufacturers are out there. They know, but what I'm trying to do is get them to make a declaration that we all know where we stand, right? And we know that a product is going to have a service life. And that service life is something that we can plan for and budget for, right? So that we don't all assume, oh, I'm going to have this for 27 years, right? You may, in fact, have this for 27 years. Odds are that if you plan for it to be an active piece of hardware for more than 10 years, you may, in fact, get caught. And we don't want that to happen. I don't think it's fair to any of us. It's not fair, to me as a distributor to get, in an unenviable situation of it's like year 9, right? And I've got 3 of those on the shelf, right? And I won't do it. I'm not going to go and say to you, oh yeah, here's this, brand new whatever, knowing that European rules say that they have to only support the product for 2 years after its delivery date. A delivery date which starts when they ship it to me, by the way. People ask me, say, why do you have 3-year warranty and stuff? Because I have to absorb that mysterious, time frame, between the time that we have the stuff in stock and the time we actually deliver it to you. Because if I send you a timer and it says, warranty on it, right, and you have a problem, you have every right to expect that that's going to be covered. Not for me to go, nope, sorry, because that's, again, remember the buffer concept. It's something that we believe very strongly in, that we don't leave people stranded. Right? I would rather spend 5 hours going over what you really want to do with this stuff and your dreams and hopes and aspirations, and then let you try stuff, rather than like, oh, here it is, and then it doesn't work, and you're like, well, it doesn't work. Yeah, but it's got a beautiful color. No. I mean, these are tools. If you do not expect to go to a store and buy a hammer, and a hammer is supposed to do hammering things. It's not supposed to do things. Yes. No, not yet. This is what we're trying to push forward now, because that brings up an interesting point. Have you ever looked at the who's on this FIS timing working group thing? A lot of manufacturers, right? It's a manufacturer-driven, self-policing type of thing, which is interesting. Yes, there's a representative of the FIS on there. Yes, there's a couple independent people. But by and large, everybody who's associated with that homologated timing working group is tied to a manufacturer. And is that fair? Again, I fortunately am not on these. To go to where are they going this year? Upper Slobovia or something. They seem to always pick, like, where have you been here? Wait, let's go there. Okay, that's a great idea. And they all go down there to have these meetings, and what do? They decide on what other exotic location they're going to next year. But no, I'm more of an action person. I have no particular, interest in going around and around, because you know what the major topic of discussion in the FIS working group for this year is? The start doors for parallel races. Okay. Snowboarding uses what? Oh, it's in Thailand? Perfect. Snowboarding, okay, uses effectively a 3-second countdown, right? Well, skiing uses a 5-second countdown. So there's been this kind of double standard, and when I did the snowboarding worlds out in Park City, so I showed up there, and fortunately the people had warned me ahead of time. They said, we don't want 5 seconds. We want, and we don't want you duct taping over, the lights. So I actually did, my due diligence. I dummied everything up in the shop. I got, the algae people to modify I said, do it intelligently. Make 2 blank beeps and then beep, beep. So it still does the same thing, but there's 2 blank beeps instead of something, And it worked out great. But the big topic of discussion is apparently they're trying to convince Swiss Timing to modify their stuff. Because Swiss Timing, when they do the city events, if you see the city parallels and so forth, and whatever they do, they use 3 seconds because that's what their equipment does. So, is anything else going to get discussed? Maybe. But, this is apparently the big critical topic that has to be dealt with. But yes, the manufacturers are going to dictate the way things are going. It's like wireless, right? Everybody's been taught, oh, wireless is bad, wireless is bad, wireless is bad. Well, it's not necessarily bad. It's, let's say, there is still reticence on the people for races because they just, they automatically perceive. Well, nowadays, putting wireless in the equipment, whether you like it or not. Who is the to deactivate it, or and not use it? I'll deactivate it, of course, but it's in there because the cost of equipment is too high. It's better just, so where are we going with this? Simple. If it's already in here, people are inquisitive, people are going to start playing with it, and they're going to see, look, oh, this stuff really works. Why are we running all these wires on everywhere when all we have to do is just turn this stuff on and use it? And this homologation business being primarily manufacturer driven, right? You can see where we're going with it. So, it is, what is useful? What makes our life not necessarily easier but more predictable, right? What is my eve with manufacturers of timing? Start gates. Right? I cannot believe that you not manufacture an ambidextrous start gate. It's a simple micro switch in a fancy box. I want to have an open global competition. I want to have every kid with a 3D printer have the opportunity to design a start gate, right? I asked my son, I said, what matters, what do you look for to a start? What is a good start for you? And, first, course prep, right? The kid wants, he wants to go out of the gate, and he doesn't want to be skating out of the gate, right? So that's paramount. But then, it's like, he goes, I want it to look good. I mean, this is the only opportunity for athletes and coaches normally to see what you're doing, right? People, they don't come into your timing building and go, oh, they've got the XY27B. Ooh, that. No. What athletes and the coaches and the parents primarily see, they see your start, right? You got, the typical thing that, the Tag Heuer start gate upside down with the logo upside down and the banana plug sticking up in the air, right? This is thing number one, right? You see all sorts of amazing things. You see like duct tape wrapped around the banana plugs and so forth, to prevent, supposedly prevent the kids from, kicking the thing out. Now, agree, the lower level kids, don't necessarily know all the things and the techniques and so forth. Then you have to be a little flexible. But if your start looks crisp and pro, and you maintain that, right? Because I'm sorry, if we're setting fastest interval we're legally allowed to use now, right? Even at 30 seconds, right? If I think I could probably make a little visual to make sure, plugged in and stuff. I'm not, I don't think that's too much to ask, right? So, covering things with duct tape, the most valuable tool I bought this year. What was the most valuable tool I bought this year? It's green. It's mechanical. Yeah, 30 US. Just use the same drill batteries. Guess what? This thing, you go, you can put a wire anywhere with this. It's amazing. Actually, chunk that wire afterwards without ruining it or ripping the banana. It just takes a little care. But still, you can clean up your start so effectively with one of these little things. I was just, it was the best purchase I made this year, just because of that. The other thing you could do to it is make safety holes. We were doing this race, and the wind was really, really blowing, right? It was gust. And the entire platform was solid ice. So I went around and I cut the holes. I have some indents. So we're sliding with your boots. You can stop and go over here. Yeah. Right. So, but no, there are simple little things that can make things. And if your start looks attractive, or is it attractive? I mean, again, okay, all going to do everything. There's going to be nuances and so forth. But assume for the sake of argument, and if you want a good check on this, I do this all the time. I go and I take pictures of my own stuff, and I go back and I go, ooh, that looks like crap. And I go and I clean stuff up. Because I'm like, if I'm taking pictures of it, somebody else is taking pictures. And that's what, you get this, I gotta document what little Johnny's doing, right? And here's little, Johnny in the start gate. And, So, we want to hear from you guys. We want to be able to go back to the manufacturers and say, hey, these guys in Collingwood and in Ontario have a perfectly valid point of where you should go. Because I will say, in particular, Tag Heuer is in a transition period right now. They have new management. They have a very good feel for what's going to happen in their future, as opposed to just taking somebody from, I guess, the watch company or from marketing or whatever. They actually had an active recruiting period, and they hired a man from Mercedes-Benz. He's French, but he went and did like the entire Mercedes-Benz, experience. He's got a marketing MBA. He's got a manufacturing and process control MBA. But the guy is going to take that company, and instead of doing the same old shit, like, any guess as to how long that aluminum anodized tube has been in existence? How many hundreds of kilometers of this tube have been used for photos? This design came in, this is like 35 years old, all right? Packaging and utilizing modern design techniques. Like I said, almost every kid has access to a 3D printer in school. It's amazing what these kids come up with and stuff. So we are now in a design challenge phase. What's the most important thing for outdoor equipment, right? It has to be weather resistant. You're never going to get weatherproof, right? But what are the things that we deal with? We deal with snow accumulation, right? Blowing snow that clogs the lenses or clogs the reflector, right? We deal with rain, okay? Water seeps into things. Water, covers the lenses. They fog up. We deal with, which is a minor thing if your posts and so forth are we're dealing with buffeting. Like there's some pretty good gusts going on right now, right? And I guarantee you, if we took that lightweight tripod, a set of photocells in that parking lot right now, they'd be on their, they'd be blown over, which is why we don't allow tripods anymore. But don't be shy about it. You're the guys who are charged with making investment, decisions. One's going back to your program directors or your club people and saying, hey, I need to invest in this. And going back to the magic homologation list, right, that none of us asked for, but we have to deal with. We've got a cliff coming up, right? In 2023, there is a homologation cliff where most of the equipment that we know and love, although completely serviceable and so forth, goes off homologation, which makes something that needs, you don't want to go and in 2023 go, oh my God, I got to spend $5,000, right? So together we should strategize on what the plan is, where, and again, everybody has the right to go in a direction which works best for you, right? Oh, they're not going to rehomologate that stuff. They already extended it once. Yeah, because again, the homologation concept of extending it was completely sound because, all right, here's the typical example, right? Our RLSN series of photocells. And I have to give a big shout out to Freestyle Ontario who had this equipment rented, and there's a scratch on it. That's great. But this cell was manufactured in 2007. All right. Algae has respectfully declined to repair any of these for a year and a half. I'm out of parts on them. I've got minor things, but if the circuit this, it's a the manufacturers themselves are determining what can and cannot be repaired. And they've done it in a kind of sliding scale way. So originally Algae said, don't send us any circuit boards back. We're only accepting full units. Well, okay. So we're going from a mail envelope of circuit boards. So we're now going to real box that costs real money to ship back, right? I don't dare send anything back to these guys now without telling them what I think's wrong with it and the serial number. And 90% of the time they go, don't bother sending it to us because we're not going to fix it. And partially it's because they don't have any parts, just like the space shuttle where they're still, when they were running that, they had to disassemble all sorts of bizarre mainframe computers and stuff to find these little chips that they need to keep the circuit boards going. So I can understand that. I mean, this thing was built in 2007, right? This is past a reasonable, Yeah. I think they all do. And the most significant thing that's going off the list is the beautiful. it's just, right. Yeah, everybody's, how many people in the room are still primarily using S4s, right? I am. It's an amazing timer. And it makes a great world chalk. But S4s, right? There's stacks of S4s. And they're great units. They've been absolute workhorses for years, right? Even though, the push the button, turn like that, clear, is, it's still, I mean, I've written more cheat sheets, and I've done, and like to fully reset, you clamp the thing between your knees. Yeah, we should all get a magic badge for that. But anyway, we're all faced with, where we're going to go with that. And it's never a thought. What's a phone? 2 years? 3 maybe? Once in a while. I met a man who had a flip phone the other day. I couldn't believe it. He thought he was still Star Trek Next Generation. But no, it is what it is. And what we need to do, again, I'm in a very unique position, okay, because I'm facilitating this type of stuff. I don't look at myself in any way nowadays as being compelled to do anything but guide you guys, all right? Because what a bizarre circumstance that we're all living in at that level, right? You go to the Subaru store and you go, hello, I'd like to buy that Subaru. And the sales associate, what do they call themselves? Consultant, brand ambassadors or whatever. After they offer you the free, mini water, they go, oh, you're with Alpine Skiing, or you're with Nordic Ski, you're with Freestyle, you're with whatever, right? It's like, here's your model, right? Well, I don't want that. I want this one. Oh, no, that's not on the list. Here's your model. And you're like, but that's awfully small, or it's too big, or, whatever, right? And then you go to the GMC truck place. Same thing, right? Here's your truck. Now, okay, where are we going? Look at what's happening with the actual production of equipment, right? See the trend? I don't know if anybody has an Algae TDC 8000, one of the large ones, other than you. I don't have them anymore. I used to, but the Algae TDC 8000, the one was, a big briefcase thing, right? Tons of buttons. Pretty cool, very impressive when you put it down on the countertop. Well, they discontinued that. Only timer that Algae makes anymore is this, right? So, literally, you got, here's your Subaru, right? It's this one. Now, of course, there may be a tiny set, next to me, but where are we with tag? See, 545. There is your timer. Okay? And then with microgate, okay, there is your your timer of a modern iteration. You still have the small ones, but these guys have gone and said we're making that, right? I don't know who is going to actually want to utilize a device like this, because here in North America we've got Cam, we've got Jeff, we've got the Vola people. We have choices of amplifiers. Cam and all these guys are like they're like magnifying glass, right? You can take something really basic and simple, right? A time base that records, splits, and identifies them by an ID. That in that data stream, the software can say, oh, that's a start, that's an intermediate, that's a finish, calc, and be done with it. All right. Of course, all these smart machines do that. I mean, you could time an entire race. Well, but you could time an entire alpine ski race of any level with a standalone timer. You do not need software to do that. Nobody realistically does that anymore. But all the facility, first run, second run, DQing, provisional rerun, all that stuff is built into these things if you dig far enough in there. But from a convenience standpoint, we have our magnifying glasses, right? We have somebody who's taken the time to create a user interface that makes our job more straightforward. Yeah, and I try not to use easy because I don't believe there's free lunch anywhere, right? There's always a price to pay, whether it's monetarily or time, right? That's always the balance. So the manufacturers are just limiting our choices, pure and simple. So what you choose to do as far as your investment pattern is purely based on the types of events that you perceive that you're going to do in the future, and basic design. I mean, this puppy, there's a reason the thing has a strap. This timer was originally designed as a coaching timer for Nordic skiing. Okay, Algae had a predecessor to this called the Comet, and the concept was that I'm the coach, and I'm going to get this, and I'm going to go out on the track, and I'm going to, time my athletes, and then I'm going to wait, and I'm going to time my athletes. It evolved into a full function timer, but in the very beginning, this is a very, very basic unit, which nowadays has kind of got to the point where if you were doing single course sanction racing, start, finish, no intermediates, no frou-frou, just basic single course timing over and over and over again, it's great, right? But where do you want to go if you want to go beyond that? You've got to add stuff on. So I love this, actually. Here's our response to adding on to a timey. Look familiar, right? Looks like the back of an S. Kind of is, right? I can now, I can take my Taito box, which is bigger than the timer, right? And I can make an S4 out of it. Well, do you really need all these inputs? Do you really need all these inputs, all this stuff? Do you need a headset amplifier built into the thing? Most of us are using separate comm lines, right? We're using amplifier boxes and separate headsets and separate pairs because trying to do everything through there, the noise, you got data noise, you got line noise, you got lift noise. So most of us have moved away from that anyway. But that timer, that's their response, to it. These guys, they were like, hey, we just put everything on the back, right? Because they were not concerned about legacy, right? What Algae, and I will give them credit, they've always been really good about legacy, right? So here's your 5-pin DIN connector, right? How many people directly connect their photo cells to their timers? So the magic red stop cable, right? Algae preserved that utility both on the timer and on this, but Tag never had that. They never had that whole the entire product line. so they never had that desire to. I say most people nowadays are just using the batteries anyway, but everybody's got a device. This is a native dual course timing. If I'm doing duals, if that's my gig, then something that's got 4 discrete inputs. 650 bucks. But it is what it is. The idea and their thing is, okay, well this you fundamentally leave in your timing building, like connected, and then you take your timer off and put it away. Okay, that's valid. My point of this is, for like $50 worth of parts and labor, I can make you any kind of adapter. This, if you're not using, the only value of this box is the multiplexing of the headset. You can. Oh, absolutely. I mean, and this is the fundamental thing about this is you have the access to all channels in here, and they're very. You lose nothing, okay, and you gain. Like I said, the only real value to that box is for people who are absolutely dead set on visuals of the S4. Okay, it's great, but also, and quite honestly, we use that multiplexing feature all the time in our cycling races because we have not necessarily intermediates, different timing points. So we can have everybody on a headset, on a party line, multiplex this box with a timing, which is quite neat because I can talk. You can talk over any timing line. Just piggyback an amplifier onto it. So that. But again, this is why we talk about this stuff, right? We don't exist in a vacuum. Your needs are different than your needs, right? Because you're not timing in the same place. You have your own peculiar, that's not a term, your own unique, right, circumstances, which is what makes my job fun because, and I try to do research too. Like I'll go online and, if you guys have a webcam or something, I'll look at it. And I think I try to do it as good a job. Now, Marshall, right, I was looking at your stuff, right, and I drew up some ideas stuff, because again, as a parent, what am I mainly concerned about other than fairness? I'm concerned about my kid going to the hospital, right? I'm concerned about my kid, can you imagine, what's going to happen? Can you imagine the conversation on the drive home? And my wife's like, I heard Frederick crashed into the finish post today. I'm like, yeah, the equipment's okay. No, not. We had a circumstance last week at this NASCAR Nationals in the Masters category. I swear, had like those displays on their top, just like beep, 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 beep. We had 5 times these people spun into the wedges and took out the post. And the ground, the snow was soft. Nobody got hurt. It was humorous, but it wasn't humorous, There's one guy, and I actually knew him, he was laying there for quite a while. And I'm like, great, that's all we need is one of the guys who's on the forums, all the athlete forums, to die because, he hit some of my equipment. And again, think about it. Think about what, and modern, if there is the best reason to send these things onto the shelf is pure and simple effectiveness. Modern photocell can shoot through BNet. I've shot modern photocells of all different brands through 5 layers of BNet. And with it, trying to false finish. A through cell set is very, very resistant to that, which means lots of flexibility. If you can get your equipment off track, don't put up wedges and willy bags and all that kind of stuff. If you can get it out of the fall zones, right? And again, there's no such thing as a purest fall zone anymore with modern skis. I mean, it's amazing some of the places people can go if they dig in wrong, right? I mean, I've seen some pretty radical movements. But you can't cover everything, but you can move your photo cells off track and shoot through some B-net. And if it works, then you've just done more for the safety than any amount of pads, or bamboos, or whatever, right? So nothing static. Don't be afraid to experiment a little bit. Again, don't do it 5 minutes before the first forerun. Everybody should actually go out. You know, there's no reason that you have to wait for the whole trail to open up before you can go and get your stuff out of the timing building and do some play acting, right? Finish line stuff. Go through some scenarios in November. Of course, there's not enough snow up on the trail. You're drilling into dirt. Odds are down at the finish building, right? There's enough stuff to do stuff with. So have some flexibility. I'm not going to take away from sales of tower pads. These are, wedges and pads and cutting posts through and doing all that kind of stuff is great. It's good. Not even in the fall zone, even better. So yes, modern, just from a safety standpoint, because there's, again, you guys, nobody makes their own decisions, right? And everybody's got to go and with other people in a committee scenario or whatever. But one good thing about the modern stuff, it is much more powerful than their. How much do I see? I would say we get back for repair average seat an infinitesimal number of photocells. Is stuff like the people will this cracks or breaks or the door the door goes or something, and in which case we don't get it back from repair. They just want a replacement piece of plastic or so forth. This stuff is, what is the biggest danger to a photocell of this type? And I don't want to drop this because I don't know if I can get meters anymore, but the meters on these are mechanical, right? So if I traumatize this by even dropping it on this carpet, especially dropping it on concrete, it's basically equivalent of dropping it on ice. The coil in that meter is going to die. And that's what we say to people. They call up, they go, my photocell isn't working. I said, okay, what kind is it? What does it look like? Does it have a big knob or a little knob? And they go, big knob. You go, okay, line it up. Just point it at the reflector and wave your hand in front of it. Bet you it still works. And it does. And they go, can we fix it? I said, yeah, just send it in. We'll put a new meter in. It's a $15 part. And, we'll send it back to you. It's very straightforward. But if you drop it, you're going to break that coil. Modern photocells don't have meters, obviously. They have just LED indicators. But snowmobile people damage stuff more than skiers. Yes, I have this group out in but these guys know that, so they have spares. But no, we do snowmobile hill climbs, which are ski races in reverse and duels in reverse. These guys go up the hill, and these sleds are insanely powerful, and these guys are competitive, right? These, they damage a lot of. Yeah. But most people understand that this stuff needs to be taken care of, right? And if you have people on your crew that don't understand that, then first and foremost, it's like people don't, they don't know, they don't know that that's, $300 some. They don't know that that's $1,000, that's $2,000, whatever, right? People, it's like rental cars, right? Who hasn't goosed a rental car once in a while? You go and you go, I always want to see if the anti-like braking really works, right? So you go in a parking lot and you test it. Well, maybe not everybody does that. I do. You are going to take more care. Just like, people who rent don't necessarily take as good a care of property as people that own, right? Make people aware that you're all in the same litter box, right? So you gotta do stuff. But a lot of it's just pure and simple. People don't understand, that this stuff. And why is this stuff so expensive? Right? Why is a timer $1,000? Because this one's number 1662, right? So this is the 662nd one that Tag, built, and that thing came out in 2014, or no, earlier than that. Let's say 2010, right? So it's not. Rogers store sells phones in a week, than in a year. So it is what it is. You've got a combination of, again, business that no one else has yet decided. There's not enough economy of scale to and go through the rigmarole. Because let's be honest. Anybody who really wanted to go to Singapore, Vietnam. Singapore's not a good example, is it? From a design and management standpoint, Singapore and manufacturing in Thailand or Malaysia or Vietnam or whatever. Yes, theoretically, for all intents and purposes, this should cost $300, right? But it doesn't. So, again, that's why we want to make sure that you guys have an opportunity to invest wisely. We have an opportunity to understand that service is what we're, service and not leaving people stranded, because very often, people go down a pathway that they don't feel comfortable with, right? And if you don't feel comfortable with the car you're driving, right, then you by nature are not going to be as capable, a driver as if you're in something you do feel comfortable with. So, and this extends out to all aspects of this because, as Nathalie said earlier, nobody has the luxury under normal circumstances of making a sea change all at once, right? Nobody wants to go and say, okay, I am going to move completely over and change my entire methodology, my entire, equipment concept. However, if somebody wanted to do that, right, we're not going to say no. We're not going to say, oh, well, no, you can't do that. What we'll say is, all right, here's the advantages, here's the pitfalls, and we will help facilitate it. Because within reason, your market here is more static than, okay? Because the photocell here that can't be used for much in the States, still we've got the NASCAR racing, right? We've got the beer leagues. We've got all these. My favorite things are the guys, from down south that call up, Tennessee or something. They go, well, I really don't need anything of that homogulated equipment. I just need the timer. So lots of other things, and again, okay, I'm not going to say, oh yeah, that's worth $500 as a trade-in, because it's not. But if there is a way of facilitating a transfer that makes sense to you and to me, because again, I got to feed my family too. We'll do it, and again, I don't have any problem whatsoever saying no, because I'm under, there are certain circumstances where no is the proper answer. But normally there's a life is an endless series of compromises, right? So it's something that we're familiar with all along. Now, where we find ourselves along this pathway is also determined by where we are. Does that make sense? No. A lot of people I deal with are only in this for 3 years. You have a kid that comes in, they're in a program, their kids are going through it, and then, out. For me to do that. The other thing that we're dealing with is people like these academies and so forth, right? The coaches go in and out of these academies, in and out of the national team. We see these people forever. So there's a balance between that. Nathalie, you are the one who is the organized one, and I'm the rambler. Where are we supposed to be going now? Right. Okay. All right. Simple fact, everything we can do to get kids off the couch and away from the phones and outside doing something right is worthwhile, right? I think it's absolutely fantastic what my kid and his friends do. They always have their twin tips with them, right? And the minute they're done with their race training or whatever, where are they? They're on rails. They're bouncing off things. They're in the woods. They're doing stuff. I don't think that there's any reason whatsoever why people can't work together on stuff, all right? Same type of thing. Like we said, with the timing and results and scoring process. Front end, it's only the middle that's a little changed. Now, the Nordic folks are going through kind of an evolutionary thing, right? They're just starting to get into this homologated timing business and so forth. And they're getting more and more involved in some of the paperwork and some of the other things that you guys have been dealing with for years. We're dealing with my favorite part of the sport right now, parallel. I've gone pretty far into that because I really think it's totally cool. But and I don't know about here, but down south, somebody just figured out a couple months ago that the entire parallel thing is basically based on snowboarding. And everybody's like, oh my God, really? Oh no, duh. The snowboard people have been doing parallel races very successfully and having a lot of fun with it and stuff here. And watching these kids at the snowboard worlds with those race boards hucking around and stuff, that was pretty damn impressive. But so rather than fight stuff, let's say that everybody who's out there doing stuff has value. And if your kid wants to go and try freestyle, or if a kid wants to do this or that, I don't know. My personal thing is, what's the harm in it, right? They will, because if you fight it, it's just, I think the kids in particular, at least, will kind of rebel against it, and they'll go, oh, well, my parents doesn't want me doing that, so I'm going to go do it anyway, just because. But from a standpoint of trying to get what we're trying to do, because again, it's all based on fairness, right? So that's what's great about what happens year round and around the world is there's certain aspects, there's commonality. So all I'm saying is, let's be open-minded, let's try to have some commonality, and you've got to look at it from the other perspective too. People from other aspects of sports, like Nathalie, how much did you learn just going down to the velodrome, right? The commonality of what was going on down there, and races and triathlon. Just go and experience these things. Go and see what they're doing. Ask questions. Do stuff like that. Because and don't be afraid to recruit. This is the thing. Everybody who's out there who's has any interest whatsoever in something is a potential recruit to come and do things as well, because we could all get sick, get injured, whatever. And again, as far as this stuff doesn't run itself, right? So having safety in cross training, having safety in having other people, other skill sets involved, is important. And we're all, they're my thing is that we're all replaceable, right? Everybody loves to think that we're the only person who can make. I'm the only person who knows. I've memorized every F factor since 1982. I'm the only person who understands everything, right? And therefore, I'm going to be invited to every single fill in the blank, right? How many jackets and T-shirts and hats and backpacks do you need, right? I mean, I'm tripping over these things, It's like, how about a backpack? I'm like, thanks, Don't be afraid to step back. And the best way of stepping back sometimes is volunteering to go and do something else. Go say, hey, I would really like to learn, pick something, how to run a start clock, right? Running that start clock is probably as difficult as but step out of your comfort zone, and experience something else, but do it on your terms. Don't get thrust into it. But if you do get thrust into it, again, you can, as I learned years ago, tomorrow is another day. You can only do your best, right? And at the end of the day will be over. And, most of this stuff is scheduled for a certain time period, right? It's just like, how many people did table service, waitressing or waitering type of thing, right? So the good thing about that business is that almost every 45 minutes or an hour, regardless of how objectionable or obnoxious the person you're waiting on is, they're going to be gone, right? So same thing. If there's some circumstance that you're dealing with that you really just suck it up and deal with it, do your best, and then it'll be over. It's just like beating yourself on the head with a stick. It really feels good when you stop. Okay. That I've completely forgot about. think we did some of that, yeah. Right. Okay. Well, there you go. So, I thank you to Nathalie to actually, forcing me to make an adjustment. We don't have to necessarily totally adhere to it. Have I been speaking for that long? Yeah, I guess I have. Yeah, with no water either. Yeah. Right? Even though I'm like, yeah, Marco Rubio for me. All right. So yeah. So I guess where do you guys want to go? I mean, I should stop talking for certain and hand it over to somebody else, or we can do we have been doing some questions and stuff. Let's do the easy stuff. Let's do questions. Who has a question? Okay. He had this. You think you went your hand up first? All right. All right. Go for it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Right. Well, no, it's legal. Okay, so what's happened in the world, but in North America is specific, is the regulatory bodies have ascertained quite correctly that frequency spectrum is valuable, right? There are people who will pay to use frequency spectrum. So, particularly here in Canada, there are very, very strict what is acceptable applications, right? And there are rules surrounding that. Now, one of the challenges that manufacturers in Europe face is, just like our stubbornness in the U.S. with the metric system, Europeans have a bad habit of inventing things and then just pushing it down the pipeline in a somewhat arrogant fashion. It's like, well, we invented it. It's perfect. What's the problem with it? It doesn't work. Well, that must be your fault. Wrong, So one of the things that is going on is trying to get the European manufacturers to understand that, first and foremost, Radio Canada and the FCC have rules. And if you don't play by their rules, they have the authority to come and shut you off, right? Because you're out of spectrum. So within each allocation now, it's also been subdivided in quarters. So there's quarter frequencies. So it's getting further and further sliced segments. So just like they decided that for the efficacy of transmission of data, those frequencies that the wireless mics were using were more valuable for data transfer than they were for voice. So one day, they gave the manufacturer, I think, 2 years, but they were like, hey, guess what? You got to change. Here's your new frequency. And what did all the manufacturers in the world go, yes, sir, thank you, because it was like, and then it just came down, and the people responsible for audio business had to go around to all the churches and all the PA system and the discos and Celine Dion and everybody and say, we're switching frequencies. And so every wireless microphone that existed back then, you used it at your peril type of thing. All right? So what the manufacturers and timing are doing is evolutionary as well. We all used to use 433 to 434 megahertz. All right? So the traditional algae silver can TED units, the cardboard box. Yeah, so these beer cans. This one's 433.5. So 433.5 to 434.6 was kind of the standard frequency band used for half-watt unlicensed transmission. Just like your key fob for your car or your garage door opener, they exist in these kind of unlicensed band type of thing. Microgate's 433, 434. So then what happened was in Europe, they said, you can't use those frequencies anymore for what you guys are doing with it because we want to use those for something else. So Algae's response to that was, their WTN concept. This is 2.4 gig. This is Wi-Fi frequencies, all right, which has its own independent issues. A lot of the manufacturers went with 868. Okay, Tag, one series of their equipment is 868. Not great here. They know about it. They are well aware that they have to find a new concept. Radio frequencies is the major challenge that faces all of us. So what I do, because I'm in, kind of a nobody told me what the rules are kind of thing sometimes, I said, I'm going to go about it the other way. I'm going to go and find out what industrial people use. All those highway signs and stuff and all those things you see, like, 35 minutes to Trafalgar and whatever. All right. A lot of these things use data modems. From a central transmission point, they send data out, like put this up on the scoreboard type of thing. Or, you're dealing with other circumstances where you need to do data transfer. Timing data is remarkably simple, right? The data stream that you're receiving is of the most basic thing. It's a prefix, it's an identifier, it's a time, and it's a character term. Simple, tiny amounts of data, right? So what I did is like, okay, I'm going to go out and I'm going to find something that's legal, designed for the purpose, industrial, so it's like you could go buy this, just as easy as I can, right, for the same price. Let timer, and instead of sending impulses or sending this or sending that, let's just send data. And that is a completely acceptable concept. We very easily showed that, and it's actually kind of fun too, because you can go and keypad timer, and you can go up to the start, and you can put competitor numbers in. You can transmit that data packet down the hill, either the timer plugged into the software, or the software directly receiving, the PC directly receiving from the receivers, and put multiple transmitters up on the hill, right? So you can have a start, finish, and if I'm doing duals, I have multiple inputs. But rather than sending impulses, right? I mean, these things, for years were just great, but this is like brute force. It's not very sophisticated. It's just like taking a button and extending it via wireless to the other end of the trail. If you're sending data, not only are you sending data, but every time, provided that you open the run, has memory. So not our rules and so forth, right? Which are great because they allow you to have a defensible forensic trail, so that when people like Matt are charged to go back and go through these races and find the times and give the people what they deserve based on the tapes, the stuff's there to do. It's not like you can't calculate or figure out anything if you don't have any evidence, right? So. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so what? Okay. All right. So wired it. Oh, you mean like getting static or? Okay. Okay. So you got a 5-watt Motorola, right? And you're keying it near your timing system, type of thing, and your screen goes blank. That kind of stuff. As a pulse. Okay. So there's only there is no, to the best of my knowledge, there is no thing that you can do with that other than you could buy an industrial Faraday cage kind of thing, right? And stick the timer inside that. And this is an S4 that's picking this stuff up, or what? Yeah, well, all right. Yeah, no, I've seen that. We used to reboot computers with. Okay. Okay. I apologize. I misinterpreted that. No. Don't wait. Are you you're stretching, or you got? Oh, okay, perfect. All right, Vance. Uh-huh. Yeah. What can you do with S4s? Okay, that's an excellent question. Other than using them as a really nice, desktop clock. Yeah. Okay. There's 5 things you can do with S4s. The smart-ass answer is a wheel chock. No. There is absolutely nothing wrong with using them as highly sophisticated synchronizable hand timers. Okay. Now, ideally, a hand timer with a printer or whatever, but imagine going to Canadian Tire and getting a Pelican case, right? And I mean, some of these little battery packs you can buy now are really very powerful and they'll last forever. So you have a S4 in a Pelican case, and you've got your little printer connected to it, right? And you have a large enough Pelican case, the thing just basically dead man backups, and then you put a banana plug input on the side of the box, right? And plug a button into it, and okay, it's a fairly large thing, but it's not that onerous to ride up on the lift with. And then you got a very, very powerful hand timer, right? Okay, that complies with all the rules, and there you go. Okay, so that's what I would do. They also make they're obviously excellent headset amplifiers, not up top in a timing building. Right? They've got a volume knob on them, whatever. Using them for non-sanctioned racing, of course. And the other thing that you can do with an S4 that, is you can well, yeah, you can, yes. Yeah. I mean, you can do other things. For example, an S4 with, you can do the same breakout concept on an S4 that you can do with a timing, all right? S4s make excellent manual backup swim timers, all right, for a swimming club. You have an S4, you have 8 buttons connected to it, common start, people push the buttons, So you can make a friend, or you can help some other sport out, as he said. What do we do with stuff, older stuff that we get? We donate a lot of stuff to Special Olympics. Special Olympics people love S4s because it's so easy to use, right? They usually have like the kids down the course, so it's like you're running one of its native timing modes. It runs. The guide comes through the finish. He's going like this to the kid. You push the yellow button, the time starts running again. The real athlete comes through. Done. Special Olympics people like that. They love simple timers like that. Yeah. S4s? No. Here's a timer. It's going to die, but no. I cannot. Again, I just sent I actually sent an S4 mistake the other day, and they wrote back and says, "What's wrong with it?" I said, "I don't remember." And then I looked through my notes. It turned out the timer worked fine. It wouldn't send RS-232 out to the port, and it turned out to be, fortunately, the EEPROM was defective. They put a new EEPROM in it. It worked again. I'm chagrined that I didn't think of that myself. However, whatever. A few euros here or there. But yes, and again, okay, these, you look on the back, how old your timers are. That's an interesting corollary question, right? Well, with tags, you can't really. They don't say. But every algae has a serial based on the date of manufacture. So if you open up, or you take, right, this one, okay, this is 18-10-38-008. Right? So this was the 8th one assembled in 2018 in October. So you can, most algae serial numbers you can tell, if the 0 was made in 2002, if it's like this one was a, if you ever have a question, again, I'm here to, I can run serial numbers from anything. Serial number, we are dealing with Europeans, and we're dealing with Germans, right, or anal, so they collect every piece of data, right? So yes, if you have any questions about anything, you can easily run it and tell you, but yes, S4s, it's a shame. Just be glad, that common sense prevailed several years ago. You know they were going to ban those things years ago. Oh, it doesn't time to 10,000ths of a second. So who gives a shit? Last I heard, we were timing ski races to hundreds and truncating and dealing with ties. Yeah, you're right. So why do we need to have a 10,000ths of a second timer? Like, what is this thing? What does this claim? 100,000ths. Wow. I mean, that's great. When are we ever going to use it? Never. And that brings up the thing, what is the rule, Mr. Rule Guy? What is the... Right. No, but that's the thing. S4, yeah. I think it depends on the timer selection. As you change the timer selection, it opens up the possible precision. Right. So yeah, there is all sorts of permutation stuff. But again, yeah, I confronted these guys years ago. There were so many S4s out. I mean, I wasn't even up here, right? This was just purely all the pre-existing customers I had. There's S4s everywhere, and rightfully so. They were amazingly robust. When that product came out in 1992, it revolutionized timing because it was the first pure dual course timer that you could plug into and utilize. So it was great, and there are thousands of them out there. We get the Burning Man thing. Yeah. Right. Right. And then no one's buying me a beer for that. So no. Yep. Yeah, I mean, all right. So there are two types of timing architecture. There's EEPROM-based timers and there's flash memory timers. Right? So EEPROM timers are that unit there has a EEPROM in it. Okay? S4s, TDC 8000s, 8001s. So what happens with an EEPROM-based timer? So I just learned this the 50 euro way. Was that little program chip? The legs of that chip can oxidize because the cradle, the socket that chip sits in, gold-plated, and the pins aren't gold-plated. So what that means is that over time, so if you have an S4 that for all intents and purposes is working fine, it's powered, everything's fine, there's nothing wrong, and then all of a sudden the thing goes haywire, right? And you try to do this, you can't plug it into the internet and update it the way you just plug a timey in or you flash the memory. You physically have to take it apart, and S4 is very straightforward. You take the screws out, you pop the cover off, and you'll see this program chip sitting there. So you make sure the timer's off, and there are, the safest thing to do is to take something and make an L-shaped little pry bar. Sacrifice a knife or something, or there are things made to do it, but you don't. There isn't room to get a screwdriver under there, but you need to pry that program chip off carefully. And usually just the act of taking it out and pushing it back in again removes the oxidation. And so while you have it off, you might as well take it and clean the little legs off. When you put it back in, you have to make sure that everything's lined up, and that. So, and this used to be a skill that we used to learn all the time, was because we had to deal with it all the time. Was you just put it on a flat surface so you can see if any of the pins are bent, and you can just kind of straighten them back out again. But yeah, so S4s have been known to do that, especially the older ones. There's 5 iterations of S4s. They're printed on the back. There's normal. Then there was like design 1.5, which added the knob on the headset. And then there was design 2, final series they made in 2008, which was the final time they made them, was design 3. They all fundamentally work the same. The only difference with design 3 is they added a direct scoreboard output on it. That's the other thing you can do with an S4. It actually has a pretty nice little automatic program in it where you take the S4 and you take it up to the start. You make your own coin out thing. Take it up to the start so that the kids can see it, and you run your photocell up to it, your scoreboard back down to it, you plug your start gate in, you put it in automatic, you tell it how fast you want it to let somebody else on course. You tell it how fast you want the scoreboard to reset, and you just tell the kids, just wait till it the screen type of thing. Yeah, you can make speed trap with it. Or aerials. You do. Although the thing is that the Timies do it more job of it. Okay. So EPROMs and cleaning and so, and again, don't do it. Don't be afraid. I would much rather hear from somebody who has a question. Send me an email or call me and say, hey, this thing's going haywire. Da 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 da. I'll say, and I'll sit with you and right? I mean, I'm not afraid of spending time, with people on the phone. It's I just that I can cook dinner and support at the same time. And again, sometimes we can fix things over the phone. Sometimes, we can't. There's just circumstances that are baffling, and there's no logical, reason why, this isn't, like, dealing with Len with this thing. I have no idea, why this wouldn't do what it was supposed to do. We reflashed it, we did all sorts of stuff, and it just didn't do what it was designed to do, with the WTN wireless, which is why we have a stack of these things, right? And we send you another one, type of thing. Again, remember that 3-month sprint, right? How many races are we doing, right? We have 5 races that probably really count, right? And that's what everybody's depending on us to do. And nobody really wants to, the guys and the women and whatever in the executive committee of the club or the ski area or whatever, they don't really want to hear that after we just did this, we just spent and invested this money and so forth, we still have problems. We thought you were going to solve that by doing this, right? So the other thing about stuff is don't be a crow. Don't lunge at shiny toys when we need to look at basic, what's the most valuable thing that you have in your whole thing? It's wiring, right? Wiring infrastructure is it's out there year-round, and sometimes you have no control over it. One of the things that's happening nowadays is ski areas, clubs, whatever, like right upstairs, right? There's a whole series of panels. We're spending $3.5 million on new snowmaking, right? Well, when those snowmaking guys come in here to put in snowmaking stuff, do you think they give a crap about your wiring or anything? No. All they care about is getting it done as fast as possible and moving on to the next ski area because they got 15 of them to do over the summer. Well, what do? Do you sit back and go, ooh, I hope they don't hurt my wires? No. You go to whomever's, mountain ops person and says, hey, can you please text me or call me when these guys come out here with their ditch witch? Because I just want to show them where our stuff is, please. Oh, they won't touch it. They won't do anything. Well, they will. And then you'll go and, what happens, right? You got 2 pieces of wire and you don't have enough to place them back together. it's a lot easier to get, in my opinion, to go and get that kind of proactively dealt with. Same with the lighting people. They're notorious too. They're on a time schedule. They don't care. They do their thing and get out of there, right? So, lunch break. It's up to you guys.